The board president will call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Meeting notice statement. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Berkeley Heights Board of Education was given as required by the Open Public Meeting Act as follows. Notice of this special Board of Education meeting was sent to the Star Ledger and the Courier News on February 19th, 2025, and was provided to all schools, PTO presidents, the BHEA president, and posted at the administration building. A copy was also provided to the public library and filed with the municipal clerk. Please rise for the flag salute. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Secretary, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Keary. Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Mr. Dillon. Dr. Forager. Here. Ms. Jolly.
Here.
Mrs. Khanna.
Here.
Mrs. Stanley. Ms. Torero.
Here.
Tonight's Board of Education special meeting concerns the referendum presentation and discussion. Dr. Feltry, would you like to introduce our presenters?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bradford. Oops, sorry. So tonight, I want to thank our architects, our bond counsel, and our financial advisors for coming and actually working with me on very short notice and meeting with me for the first time, I think it was a week and a half ago, to help us start the process of understanding the whole referendum timeline process intricacies. I know that this is my 6th week in the district, and one of the things that you all charged me with looking at was whether or not a referendum was palatable for the community. And this is the first step to open up the conversation. I know that there were things that happened in the past, and I can only move forward. I can understand what happened in the past, but I can only move us forward. And this is the first step in opening the lines of communication about what is a referendum, what's it going to take, and then the steps in the process and the next steps that we would need to take if we actually want to move forward with doing this for 2026 when our debt rolls off. Or if we're not going to do it then knowing what the consequences is the wrong word, but knowing what it entails to do it at another time if we're not going to be doing it in March of 2026. So we can be informed as a board, as a district, and as a community as to what we want for Berkeley Heights. So without further ado, I'll let you all introduce yourselves individually and take us through it, please.
Evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Hello. My name is Frank Massinio. I am the principal and founder of Solutions Architecture. We are the board's architect of record. We've been in district for 12 years. We have, done a variety of projects throughout the district very successfully, and we have looked at the subject of referendum on more than one occasion. The referendum process is a collaborative process that involves everyone. From the Board of Education, the administration, your architects. With me is bond counsel Tony Salamini from Willents. We also have here finance team from Phoenix Advisors. Danielle Marino is here. So this team is brought together to walk you through the process and let you understand it. What you're going to see tonight is more of the process and more of the history of what was previously looked at, because nothing here is set in stone tonight. This is not a decided thing. This is something that we're going to talk about and reboot where we were. We're going to determine if this is necessary, if it's something we want to keep, the projects that were previously in this, which ones have been completed already, which ones still remain to be done. So this is really, a starting point. There's nothing here that's sacrosanct. Or we're gonna look at all these pieces, and you as a board, we're gonna give you the information to make decisions on moving forward.
Good evening, everyone. As Frank indicated, I'm Tony Salamini. I'm an attorney with Willens, Goldman, and Spitzer. Our role is as bond counsel to the Board of Education. So we advise the Board of Education on all legal aspects of a referendum. If you decide to move forward with a referendum, we prepare all the resolutions authorizing the referendum process. And then ultimately, I'm the one that writes the bond question that goes to the voters. And then we help and assist with the hopefully eventual sale of the bonds. I've had the opportunity to work with the district for many years and on several of your past referendum back in the day. Also, I've been involved in the planning process for a couple of years with some of your prior administration, so I have a little bit of the history. In terms of referendum, just real quick, there's 15 referendum coming out in the state March 11th. I'm working on 10 of the 15. So I have a pretty good idea of the referendum that are going on in the state, what other school districts are doing. And the reason why most school districts are going to referendum is to basically get that debt service aid and to spread the cost out over the useful life of the project. So it's a really exciting opportunity for you guys with your debt forecast, and I'm looking forward to helping with the process and being a resource to answer any questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Marino, and I'm with Phoenix Advisors, and we're your financial advisor. So we provide all the financial projections and tax impact information when it comes to the referendum. And then if the referendum is successful, we help bring the district into the bond market to sell the bonds. So just a little background. Phoenix Advisors was founded in 2004. I've been with the firm since 2013, and Berkeley Heights Board of Ed has been our client for the past 10 years. And this just shows some of our experience, and we were #1 in New Jersey as a financial advisor in the past year. I just thought this would be helpful for you all to see, just to get an idea of what other districts have done in the past year or so. So this is our experience selling bonds from successful referendums since the beginning of 2024. As you can see, most districts have sold bonds between 15 and 30 years. And the interest rates have been somewhere between 3.5% and 4%, under 4%. Everything has come in under 4% for the past year. So this just shows, how much they sold, their credit rating and the term, and then again, the interest rate they received. So Berkeley Heights, you guys have a AA+ rating just for comparison purposes, which is just one notch below the AAA, which is the top rating that you can receive. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at these rates. You're at the top of the rating scale here. So what that means is that you'll achieve the lower interest rate. And then another slide I just thought this graph would be helpful because sometimes we hear that people think that we're in a high interest rate environment. And what this graph shows is that further in the front of the curve in the shorter term, rates are in fact higher than they were on average for the past 20 years. But as you look forward, the rates are about average for the past 20 or so years. So what we expect, I guess, from the district is that if you're mostly doing renovation projects, you can do a bond for a 20-year term. So it's going to be a longer term issuance. And when we go out for the public, we use a conservative interest rate because we don't want to come back and say, oh, sorry, it actually was higher. So we'd use something around a 4% with the expectation that rates would come in lower. And just to give some historical perspective on the district's debt, in 2005, the district had a successful referendum that was financed through bonds in 2006. In 2014, the district refinanced their debt, basically how you would refinance a mortgage to get a lower interest rate. And that is the only bond that's currently outstanding, and it matures on March 1st of 2026. So the idea is when a district's debt is maturing or falling off, that you can replace that debt with little to no impact to the taxpayers. So in order to do that, you have to have a referendum in the same fiscal year that the debt is maturing. So that's the next fiscal year, which is 2026. And then you have to also issue the bonds in that same fiscal year so that your debt payment is in the 27 fiscal year, so that there's no overlap, and then there's also no drop off. So that's why the timing may make sense now for the district to do something. If you decide to, for example, let the debt drop off, then in the future, the taxpayers would sort of feel that hit a little harder, maybe, depending on the amount of bonds you go out for.
I just want to point out that we have worked successfully with both Phoenix and Wilentz on numerous referenda over the past 15 years that we've been doing business. So Solutions Architecture is a multidisciplinary architecture and interior design firm. We're located in Verona. And this is schoolwork is what we do. We don't spread ourselves with other work. One of the things that we have a great deal of success with is referendum planning. We are statistically proven for passing referenda, putting them up, passing them. And our system is based upon transparency, district and community involvement, making sure that we convey the need to the public, and then we also provide single source referendum planning and marketing. Our list of referendum successes you see here, it's a big table, but in short, in March of 2023, or in 2023, the entire year, we passed 4 out of 4 referendum for $212 million. And since 2019, we've been responsible for 11 out of 12 referendum successes. So the system works. And we want to talk to you a little bit about that process and how we work with the team so that you have an understanding of where, how this process goes. So initially, this is about meeting with the administration, determining which way we're going to go, working with architect, bond counsel, and finance team, develop a target date for the referendum, which you just heard, in order to take advantage of debt rolling off, needs to be March of 2026. There are other dates for the referendum, which we can talk about, but because of the debt rolling off and the time needed to prepare the packages, the DOE submissions, March 26th is a viable option. We want to establish the referendum submission schedule, and with that is reviewing your facility's needs. As I said before, what work has been completed, what work remains to be done, what capital projects, what educational projects, meet with the administration and establish those educational projects. A capacity analysis, this is a pretty big thing that we've been doing a lot of, and the reason that we do it is we try to determine whether additions are truly necessary. Where a district is looking to add square footage to a building, if we do a capacity analysis, a lot of times we find out that through scheduling or through manipulation of classrooms, we're able to gain more space. And the reason for that is enrollment is not always the issue. Your enrollment may be flat, but yet your buildings are losing capacity. Why is that? And 9 times out of 10, they're losing capacity because of special ed needs and the limitations put upon those classrooms through special ed. You may have an 800 square foot classroom that has 6 children in it, as required by that special ed requirement. You may have 3 of those classrooms. If we were to divide one of those classrooms in 2 and put the 2 small group into the classroom that it's meant to have, you'd now pick up classroom space. So we can do that and look at that process. We want to finalize a referendum scope and budget. We want to incorporate community input. There's potential for community surveys to go out and ask the community what their thoughts are. Would you support a referendum if it had this in it? Would you support a referendum if it had that in it? We want to establish the question or questions to be asked, and we work very closely with Tony to do that. We want to conduct the tax impact analysis, and we want to talk to the financial advisors to do that. One of the things that we do differently with tax impact in working with Phoenix is a lot of referenda go out and they say, your tax impact on the average assessed home in town is going to be X. Well, not everybody has the average assessed home in town. A lot of people have a home that's lower than the average assessed home. And they automatically think that they're going to pay what that number you said for the average assessed home. So what we do is we provide a district tax impact calculator, goes on your website. People from town can go on your website, plug in their assessed value, and we explain what their assessed value it is. It's not market value. It's what your tax assessor's office has. And you enter that, and it will tell them what their assessed value will be based upon the numbers that Phoenix comes up with. So nothing is left to chance. There's no guesswork. Everybody has the opportunity to see what the tax impact is. That's also a reason for success. We prepare schematic designs and submission to DOE. Referendum dates, as I mentioned, there are 5 referendum dates that can be used. 4th Tuesday in January, 2nd Tuesday in March, last Tuesday in September, November 7th, which is the general election, and the 2nd Tuesday in December. There are statistics as to which dates are the most used and the most successful. We typically try to stay away from January. Holiday bills are coming in and people don't really like to add more to their plate come January. March has always been a very popular referendum. September has become one of the most popular referendum dates. It never used to be, because when people were away over the summer, we couldn't get them the information. But with social media posts and websites, everybody can get the information, and September's become very popular. November 7th is the general election. It's true that the other elections cost money. There is a separate fee for those, and the general election is not an extra cost. However, depending upon the relationship with the community and the township, the November 7th election could provide difficulty for a referendum to pass, because the ability to politicize the educational work is always there. So if someone wants to, is concerned about being reelected, then the referendum could have difficulty. So we try to avoid November for our referendum, because we don't want to mix the two. And then 2nd Tuesday in December is also very popular. So if you look at this chart, you're going to see referendum results for election by month from 2014 to 2023. January, there were 54, 78% passed. March, 96, 72% passed. In April, there were only 10. April's kind of an odd month to do this, but 80% passed. In September, 122 referenda, 69% passed. November, there were 95 and 70% passed. And in December, there were 86 total referenda with 56% passage. So as you can see, the most popular month is September at 122, March 96, November just behind with 95, and that edged out December, which has always been higher with 86. The success rates are pretty close. March had 72, November 70, September 69, and December 56. So months like January and April had fewer elections but did have higher success rates. They're not your common referendum dates for us. The referendum strategy, anything that we do for a referendum, we want to make sure that we're including something for everyone. We don't want to be heavy athletics and no instruction. We don't want to be heavy instruction and no performing arts. We try to address and convey needs, not wants. Obviously, this district has a great deal of work that needs to be done. We've had it for some time, and we've got to get to a point where we are in agreement as to what work needs to be done. For a referendum, unfortunately, what people don't see doesn't sell votes. The roof, the windows, the boilers, and they don't see it. It's behind the scenes. Although it is critically important for the operation of the school and could shut down school in a second. Major roof leak, boilers go offline in winter season, but they're not the high impact things. So we want to focus on including much needed projects that the community can see and value in addition to handling those capital projects. So we might look to consider special projects that have higher visual impact and create learning and exciting learning environments. Media centers, media labs, maker spaces. In fact, the media center was part of an evaluation that we did 4 years ago. That was the impetus behind establishing the referendum. STEM and STEAM was also a key component. And considering low-cost, high-impact graphics in big common spaces, which can enhance school spirit and the educational environment. We often do a community survey because we don't like to do things in a vacuum. We value the input of the community, and we want to find out what's important to them. The previous survey that we sent out in Berkeley Heights, the following items you can see. STEM and STEAM receive a high level of support from the community. Exterior building improvements received a high level of support. Interior building improvements received a high level of priority. Full-day kindergarten at the time received moderate support, and paving projects received moderate support. I'll note that at the time we saw moderate support in the surveys for paving. It was surprising to us because paving's been a monumental issue here for a long time. We've wanted to do parking lots over and over again. So the community survey would look something like this. It's a Google survey. It goes out to every member of the community, and the answers are collated and, analyzed, and it spits out a report on the metrics associated with the survey. And from there, we have the data and information we can use. If there's zero support for a particular topic or question, that's something we're not going to look to fight to put in the referendum. If there's a lot of support, then we're going to try to steer and do things to make that happen if budget allows. In the past, and again, this is not about the past, but it is about understanding. We had a facilities audit that we looked at. We walked through the buildings. We found out a great list of items to be done. At the time, that list was submitted or pared down and then submitted to the Department of Ed. These projects were submitted, received preliminary eligible approval, and at the time, COVID hit and the referendum kind of stopped at the time. But those projects that were included, Media Center and STEM Lab renovations and alterations at Governor Livingston, as well as capital work that we had but was later removed from the scope. At Columbia, it was Media Centers and STEM Labs. Various roof replacements were included, and existing asphalt parking lot repaving was included. Media Center upgrades at Hughes, classroom reconfigurations, and various window replacements were part of the submission. At Mountain Park, we had Media Center, classroom reconfigurations, various roof replacements, parking lots, and mechanical upgrades. At William Woodruff, we had Media Center, classroom reconfigurations, roof replacements, and mechanical upgrades, and the similar at Mary Kay McMillan with the exception of roofs. So Media Center, classrooms, and mechanical. That was essentially the submission that went down to DOE last time. So our charge this time would be to say, did we do any of that work? Is it complete? Can we take it off the list? Does that lower the cost? Is there stuff on this list that we still find to be a high priority and we still want to do? Are Media Centers still a high priority? If they are, we want to look to include them. Our STEM lab and STEAM or science labs, are they the priority? So as far as our strategy for referendum, we would meet and understand the needs. We would look at that list. We would look at the new list. We've already obtained a new list from the principals of items that they, perceive need to be done in each of the schools. Some of them, and when we originally talked, we talked about wants, needs, wants, and wishes, right? When we're looking at the whole picture, we want to look at needs, wants, and wishes. If in a perfect world we can afford to do it, we would do everything. But we want to understand where their heads are at when they're doing this. So we've received lists from them. Those lists are going to be collated and coordinated with our list. Obviously, costs have changed since the last time we looked at this. Significant, unfortunately. So we need to update all the cost estimates in the list. We need to determine which lists are priority. And then what we can do from there is once we have the list and the priorities, we can tell you all priority ones are going to cost X. You're going to get X in debt service aid. This is the net impact to the district. So we're going to do that. We're going to look at the facilities again. Anything that was listed mechanical, our engineers will come out again, evaluate them, make sure that the need still exists. If something's been replaced, we can take it off the list. Review the priority projects with the Board of Education. We've also got something called a project selection tool. Previously, it was an Excel spreadsheet with a yes or no column. You hit yes or no, and it takes it off the list and changes the cost for it. We now have a website page that you can go to. You can actually see your referendum scope. You can say no, and it will revalue the referendum if you take certain items out. And you as a board can play with that. So, if there's a need that each of you think, you can have your own copy and say, this is the referendum I want. It's a great tool. There's nothing, again, nothing set in stone. You could say yes or no, or change it and come up with a value, as long as we understand where you want to be. We would develop the bid documents and adjust costs as necessary. A big part of the cost factor here is working with Phoenix to understand the tax impact. Obviously, people look at the first number we come up with as the be-all, end-all. The referendum's going to be, and I'm throwing this out, $10 million. But they look at the 10 million, and what you have to recognize is that when we come up with that value, a lot of these projects are eligible for 34% state aid. So the 10 million is actually closer to 7. So the 7 is also what the tax impact will be based upon. So we have to understand you're getting debt service aid, and you have to understand that that number, that resulting number, $20 a year, is based upon the tax impact. So whatever we're comfortable with at the end, we have to weigh back and forth with scope, budget, and taxing, and understand where we're coming. So how do we get the message out? Obviously, it's a collaborative process involving communication between the board, the administration, ad hoc committees, architects, financial advisors, and bond counsel. We need to express to the public why this work is needed. We need to establish a theme. What are we looking to achieve through this referendum? We need to be very mindful for the timing of the release of information. And this is one of the reasons I think we've been so successful. The right information needs to be distributed at the right time. The wrong information released at the wrong time can be detrimental to the process. Even the right information, if released at the wrong time, can set us back. So we have to be mindful of when we're putting these things out there. This is a work in progress. We're going to have option 1, option 5, option 3. You guys are going to make a decision. So if option 5 goes out and it wasn't even on your radar, well, now the public thinks that option 5 was in play, and it's not, or it never was. So we have to be mindful of when that's done. And how do we control that? We make sure that everyone involved in disseminating that message, it has to be the same response from everybody. How do we do that? We give you a cheat sheet. We provide, when the referendum the scope gets evaluated and finalized, we provide a trifold brochure with every piece of information that's required for the referendum. Every board member has it. You can have 50 in your car. If you're at ShopRite and somebody comes up to you and says, what's in this referendum, you can hand it out or read from it. Everybody now has the same answer. You may have a different impression. You may have said, no, it's 6 science labs and it's only 4, and now the wrong information's out. So we try to avoid that from happening. That need for transparency is huge. The public wants to know that you're telling them everything that we have to tell them. Nothing's being held back. There's no reason. It's important to be willing to provide it. And we have to provide opportunity for review and comment. It's big. It's big. Ask a question. It's all people want. There may be adversarial, conversations, but it's debate. It's all good. They want information. We have it. We want to provide it. We may not agree, but getting the information out there and providing that opportunity for review and comment is essential. The other thing that we do is we try to espouse the need for simplicity in our presentations. Everything that we do is simple. Long, wordy documents don't help anybody because I can't get past the first paragraph, let alone anybody else. And I know the job. So we try to use graphics and infographics to display the information. If you vote yes, what will you get? If you vote no, what will you get? It's very simple. People can look at that and understand what happens if they vote yes or no. Understanding that the district can save millions with debt service aid is an enormous point to make. Knowing that you're not getting debt service aid if you take money out of capital and do this work. You may have 10 million in capital. You may say tomorrow we can do all the parking lots out of capital or all the roofs out of capital. The problem with doing that, and you can, the problem with doing that is you're going to pay full price, 100%. If we did parking lots and wait, now there's another scenario. You can do that, put it in the referendum. If the referendum passes, you get 34% on those items. You can then take your capital surplus and pay down but you've now used your capital to do that work and gotten 34%. So there are strategies that we employ with bond counsel, with finance, to be able to make this work in your favor. So we want simplicity in the message. We want to let people know that debt service aid is available. It's only available on eligible projects. Additions, it's very difficult to get funding for additions without a significant number of unhoused students. But capital renovation projects, parking lot projects, fields, not eligible. Expansion of parking lots, not eligible. But parking lots, milling and paving, fixing the potholes, and restriping, all eligible. So those are projects we want to take advantage. If the district wanted to use capital to do a project, I'd say do a project that's not eligible for funding. Now you're not losing it. Everything that, in order to get the debt service aid, it has to be funded through a referendum, and it has to be tied to education or maintenance. Any other work is ineligible. If we were to do one classroom and replace the ceiling, the state would not find that eligible for funding because it's maintenance. You should be doing that one classroom by yourself. But if we do a wing of classrooms in the ceilings, now it's eligible. So understanding the eligibility requirements, understanding is what allows us to craft a referendum and tailor it to maximize your debt service aid receipt. We'll talk pretty quick on referendum schedule. So we have a referendum calculator. We put in a referendum date. It spits out some standard numbers on the side. I'm going to zoom into those a little bit so you can see. So if the referendum date is Tuesday, March 10th, we have to notify the County Board of Elections 61 days prior, which puts that Friday, January 9th. The board is going to review the FEC and PEC letters. You have 30 days to do that. So that backs us out to December 10th. There's a DOE review period. DOE takes anywhere from, they have 90 days by regulation. They have an additional 30, so 120, but they have been taking up to 6 months to review projects, depending upon the size of the district and the complexity of the project and the fact that there's only 5 reviewers down at DOE. So we need to get in early so we give enough time. So this is showing 140 days for DOE to approve, 120 days to prepare the DOE packages, get everything ready, and then necessary time for schematic planning scope brings us all the way back to October. So the reason for showing you this is that decisions need to be made to make March, right? We can't dally. We need to make sure that we can come up with a list, a positive list of items to be done and get it done. We will tell you that we'll do everything we can to make that submission happen from our end, but it's going to require decisions being made on this end. So public relations, part of this, we have an in-house social media coordinator and a graphic designer. We prepare all the content. We work with your media specialist or your technology person to gain access to your social media pages. We'll create the posts. We'll get approval from you. Once it starts to hum, we'll just submit. We'll just put posts out. We'll start early enough on, September, usually after we get final DOE approval and we know the numbers and we know the debt service aid, we will now start to litter social media with teasers and posts, find out more, meeting dates, dates with, local organizations from the Lions to Unico, whatever organizations you want, we'll start doing, road shows. 60 days out is really an intense campaign, ongoing public info, public meetings, responding to voter questions. Your website will have a frequently asked questions page on it. Anybody that asks a referendum question, you'll also have an email associated with the referendum. Anyone that asks a question, it gets responded to and goes up in the frequently asked sections page. Now, anybody who's looking for it can see that the question's already been asked. Here's the answer. 20 days out, a postcard mailer, which is called an EDDM, Every Door Direct Mailer, goes out to every address in the community. And that makes sure that it's not just the school community seeing it, but everybody else gets it. We can do them more than once. They tend to be costly because of postage and they're going out to every single member in the community. But we typically find that doing them 20 days out gives people a little bit of boost. We also boost Facebook and Instagram posts during the final weeks to make sure that people are seeing this. prepare renderings for the public, get the website up and running. So we have a kind of a checklist for ourselves on when that stuff needs to happen. Agree on dates for the meetings. Which organizations do you want to see? PTO, fantastic way to get the word out to your parents. Go to each of the PTO meetings. September, back to school nights, commandeer a piece of that to talk about the referendum coming up and what's going on. Social media campaign begins in October, school club meetings, band, choir. After a football game, have a table, brochures, town meetings, et cetera, et cetera. On your website, we prepare information packages. They will be the referendum committee presentation. So that's the final presentation that has everything in it. There'll be a quick reference guide, which will be select slides so that people aren't going through a 70-page presentation. If they want to see the scope of work and the plans, they can click on just those. We have those separated. If they want to just see the costs, they can click on those. If they want to go to that tax impact calculator and enter their assessed value, they can do that. And they can look at the schedule as well. So all these packages are on your website. The frequently asked questions are there as well. This way, we have one location that everybody goes to. And we can work with the township to try and get any emails and information through their website. So there's things that we've done in the past, try to get full transparency. Social media, web, news and local, we have great relationships with News 12. We've done articles with them before. We have the ability to get press releases out and do things like that, to shine a focus on the need and what needs to be done here. Face-to-face promotions, I mentioned, back to school nights, site building walkthroughs we've done successfully, information sessions, community committees, and community organizations. Examples of social media posts, these are Facebook posts, they are Instagram posts. This was for Oceanport, talking about the average age of the schools, what we were doing, reminding people to vote, and talking about when these things are so that you're keeping people informed along the way. We prepare videos, informational videos. There's a YouTube link attached. You can check out the video that we've done, but it's a 1 minute, 2 minute video on what's in the referendum. We can provide any number of social media elements to show the public. This is that trifold I was telling you about. It's a big component here, so it has everything that the referendum has: cost, budget, scope, dates, polling places, where everything is. It's all in one location. You simply have to hand that out or read from it, and you have all the information you need. There's a newsletter style. If you put out a district newsletter, we can incorporate our style to your style. One of the things that you'll notice from any of the graphic information we put out, the branding is all the same. When someone sees it, they know this is the referendum. This has to do with that referendum. So it sets a tone across the board. The direct mailer is the same information that's on that brochure, but it goes out in a postcard to the public. We've done vinyl banners at the school so that each school reminds everybody when it is. We've done lawn signs handed out. People can put lawn signs on your lawn, reminding them when to vote. As a board, you cannot tell the public to vote yes, but you can tell them to vote. Go out and vote. Vote dates coming up, you can vote. Presentation boards for the lobby, whatever else is needed, we provide a host of that information. So process-wise, you've just got a lot of information in a short period of time, so I apologize for that. But I think that it gives us an oversight in what needs to be done in terms of the process. Specifics, we're going to delve into, at the administrative level and, working together with the district to understand what those needs are. You as board members have the ability to put your items in the list as well. What do you think as board members needs to be done? So we want to include everybody. We want to get the most information possible. And we want to make sure that, we try to do this as efficiently as possible so we don't waste time. Meeting that March date is critical if you're going to take advantage of that deadline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Messino. Are you the presentation, or do we need to hear from our other individuals? No, okay,
If there's questions.
yes. So let's ask for questions from board members first. Yes, Dr. Forager.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. what, do you have any idea what the cost of a special election would be?
Yeah.
Sorry. This is an estimate, but probably for a community your size is about $30,000.
30K, okay. And, let's see. One of the things, a couple of things are under yeah,
We just find out what is included in the 30K.
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Sure. So when you have a general election, the costs are paid for by the municipality. So it's all the voting machines, the poll workers, the printing of the ballots, all the publications, the moving of the voting machines, all the fees associated with the county, the Board of Elections, Superintendent of Elections. So I'd say that's probably a pretty good estimate. The one thing with any of the costs, as Mr. Messinio indicated, the debt service aid, Mr. Messinio will include the cost for the special election, the cost for the professionals, the design cost, in with the overall cost of the referendum. So if it's an eligible project, you also will get aid on any of the associated costs as well.
And do people, sorry, just.
why don't,
just-
why don't we go around in order,
do-
then if
do-
you have a follow-up, you can,
I have a follow-up
I don't want
on
to
the,
cut you
on
off,
the
but I do have a
election.
few questions.
So is the election exactly like the November election where people have the ability to do mail-in ballots and everything? Is it exactly the same, or does it have to be in person?
The rules are exactly the same. So if you've requested a mail-in ballot for any prior election, you will get a mail-in ballot. You don't have to request again. There's ballot drop-off boxes. The only thing that's different is the time of the election is selected by the board, so that can vary.
Dr.
Okay.
Forager.
All right, you talked about things that are eligible costs. Would a press box be an eligible cost?
It is unlikely that a press box would be eligible.
Unlikely, okay. And how about lights on the Governor Livingston Field?
I don't want to say yes, but I will get back to you on that. We'll look at that.
Okay, and the 34%, is that by statute, or is it, could it somehow turn out to be less than 34%?
Yes.
It could be less,
And the reason it could be, so,
yeah.
and Tony may want to answer this because he's got more.
Sure. So
Hmm.
these projects are being submitted under a law that was passed in 2000. And the statute says that any eligible projects will be eligible for up to 40% debt service aid or your district aid percentage, whichever is higher. Because the wealth of your community, you'd be capped out at 40%. For the first 11 years of the statute, the state has fully funded that debt service aid requirement at 100%. And since 2011, the state has funded that at 85%. So that's why Mr. Messinio was indicating 34%. And that's why when any of your financial projections will be done, your financial advisor does its most conservative way and does it at 34%, 85% of the 40%. And I guess to note, prior to this law, a community like yours wouldn't have been eligible for any aid. So this law has really been a huge benefit for communities like yours to get aid
Okay.
back to your communities.
And when,
Just to finish that question.
Yeah.
The reason that it could be less than 34% is of the number of projects, if 80% of them are eligible, that those 80% would receive funding, the 20% would not receive funding, and therefore the net difference would be 28%, 25%, whatever the cost of the ineligible versus the eligible was, it would be, lower. Your aggregate would be lower. Does that make sense?
yes. Now, on the tax impact analysis, you consider we lose from our ratables properties because of pilot agreements. Do you take the pilot agreements into account?
It's just the tail end of that. What was the question?
Okay, basically, the township's been entering into pilot agreements
Oh.
because of affordable housing.
Yes.
And so those properties, I think, are essentially removed from the tax rolls for about perhaps 30 years.
Right.
So
That does not.
there's a
get
hit
included.
to our ratables. The question is, when you do your impact analysis, do you consider the pilots, the fact that some of the ratables are off the rolls for 30 years?
We would just use the current ratables, which would not include the pilot money. And for a project that your district might do is only 20 years, so those pilots may still be in place
Yeah.
during the term. So they would not, the school would not receive, well, depending on your agreement with the town, may not receive any of that pilot revenue.
Okay. Um, I'll stop there and may come back later.
I have a question.
Okay, Mrs. Terror.
So when you're looking at the term for the bonds, how do you take into account projects that have items that are depreciating? In other words, if you get involved in technology, technology ages. So how do you factor that in? Are there separate pieces of it, or or is it just kind of like that money's gone? How do you work that in?
Yeah, it's the average useful life of all the projects. Typically renovation projects run 20 years. Athletic type projects are not as long. You can go longer in the term if you're doing an addition. And really the only way to reach a 30-year term is to do a completely new building. So 20 years is sort of the jumping off point for renovations, but we work with the architect to kind of take into account which projects are being included and what the max useful life is. And it's also, Tony can probably talk about this, set by state statute.
Yes. Mrs. Khanna.
Can you talk about the role of the board through the referendum process?
So the board is there to, you are responsible for making the informed decision on the projects that need to go forward. So that's a big piece of this. Understanding what the cost of those projects is and what the tax impact is, and coming to an agreement on what we consider to be a palatable referendum cost for the community. Obviously, we want to be fiscally responsible. Knowing that we have debt rolling off, to be able to use that to our advantage is big. I think it was said in one of our other meetings, just because you may have 24 million rolling off doesn't mean that you're going to be able to replace that with 24 million, today. Interest rates are different, things like that. So obviously, as a board, you are involved every step of the way. We give you updates on the DOE. You're going to have to approve the submission to the DOE. It's going to have to be signed by the board president, superintendent of schools. The business administrator is going to have to sign the cost estimates, the budget estimates that go down to DOE. So as a board, you're involved every step of the way and, responsible for the submission of this. We're just the tool. So, we want to make sure that you have the right information and that we guide you in this process.
So if I can just double click on that a little bit, you mentioned that we need to approve the submission that needs to go to the DOE. There are cost estimates. Is that generally through resolutions, like at a board meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So the list of projects that I showed you from the previous, that was attached to the resolution that said, the Board of Berkeley Heights is going to submit the project to the Department of Education, is going to expect debt service aid for capital renovations and improvements to the district. That list that you saw was attached to the back of it. So you'll see the exact list that was done. You'll see each of the floor plans for each of the buildings that show the scope of work that's going to be submitted. So you'll be able to know unequivocally what's in the referendum. And that's what you'll approve by resolution.
Do you-
Understood.
Oh, sorry. Do you help write those resolutions?
Absolutely.
Mrs. Stanley?
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
not
I'm
done.
Sorry, Mrs. Khanna.
You mentioned that there was a survey done, was it 2019?
I believe it was 2019.
Do you have any idea how many respondents to that survey?
So the survey process that we have, we typically do, the survey that was done then was done by the district. So I can't pull the survey, otherwise I would have shown you your survey. I know the survey results because we got them, but we didn't administer it. It was administered by the district through the PR consultant or PR person. So, but I don't have the information. I could dig back and try to see if we have a copy of the initial, but
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful for us just to kind of have some background of what was done before.
sure.
Um, you briefly mentioned that as board members, we can't really ask people to vote yes. Um, so is the stance of the board expected to be neutral, meaning we can share information, but we can't say, hey, let's be supportive? Like, I'm just trying to understand better
Yeah.
what we should and shouldn't be doing.
Sure, that's a great question. So the bright line rule is, as a public entity, you're not allowed to spend any public funds to advocate for a referendum or for anything. You can spend public funds to educate, but you can't spend public funds to advocate. But you're all individuals, you all have constitutional rights, you've all been elected by your community. As an individual, you can advocate for the referendum, advocate for the needs of the project. If you do so on your own social media, you just have to put a disclaimer that you're speaking as an individual and you're not speaking on behalf of the board. But the real bright line issue is you're not allowed to spend any public funds to advocate for a referendum. But as an individual, you can say, I support this because, we did this information and we want to improve the libraries for the following reasons.
So if this becomes a topic of discussion, say in a board meeting, we are allowed to sit at the table and express our point of view.
Sure.
It's just there's a way you're making a very specific point about not being able to advocate for the referendum through the spending district dollars.
Correct. That's why, if you noticed all the great information, and Mr. Messinio's firm does a great job with all the flyers and the graphics and the website, it all is just informational. We're doing these projects, we're fixing these roofs, it costs this much to the average taxpayer, this is why we're doing it. Not vote yes, not, no scare tactics, it's just information because, flyers cost money. You're spending money on that information. But as an individual, you're allowed to advocate.
Got it. Two more questions. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how do you select the projects that go into the referendum? It looks like the debt service aid is certainly a factor to what goes in there, but are there like other reasons or other factors on how we as a board should work with you to select the projects?
So it comes down to priority. Comes down to what is an imminent need. For us, the first things that we look at are health and safety. Any health and safety issues that need to be resolved, those are at the top of our list. The second would be building envelope. Roofs, windows, doors, anything that can allow nature in poses an additional threat to the school. Ceilings get wet, that causes another issue. Sheetrock gets wet, that causes problems. We want to try to address building envelope. Then it comes down to the need. When's the last time the locker rooms were renovated? Is it a long time ago or is it recently? Is your science lab, the original to the building? Does the facility support the curriculum that you're offering? Can it? Because if it can't, then those are direct correlations to you wanting to upgrade those rooms. So that list is going to be based on priority. Now, a lot of times we'll do a facilities audit. We'll walk through a building. The team of architects and engineers, and we'll note on our list, the boilers have 5 years left. The windows are past their useful life. They're only single pane. The roofs, the warranties are ending and they're leaking. These are all priority 1 items for us. There may be other items that we list as priority 2 or 3. However, that's from our opinion. You as board members know where the hot button topics are in district. Something that I say is a priority 3 may be to you a priority 1, maybe something that you have to address just because it's part of what's going on in district that we don't know. So we're going to look at it from a professional architectural standpoint, and you're going to look at it for what you know, and you're going to put the two together. So that project selection tool I mentioned to you, where it enables you to look at a master list, a la carte, and then pick and choose each of those that you want or that you think. You can also change the priority of those numbers. So ultimately, the goal would be to say, what's the cost of all the priority 1 items? What's the cost of all the priority 2 items, 3 and 4? If the cost of doing everything is palatable, we do everything. If the cost of doing just priority 1 and 2 is the palatable number, that's where we go. So that's kind of how we try to steer it and direct it by priority. What is important, what needs to be done? Health and safety, building envelope, and then infrastructure, wherever else you see needs to be done.
Got it. And then the last one right now. Say we have this referendum in March of 2026. What is the earliest that any project can be executed coming out of that, assuming it is successful?
So March puts us in a bad spot. And it puts us in a great spot for a referendum because March is a great time for a referendum. But if we were to do a September referendum, that would give us from October, November, December, January to build drawings for the projects. March, as a rule, as our firm will not put a project out to bid in March. The reason for that is it's already too late for that summer. So contractors are full, they have all their work schedule lined up. If we put a project out to bid, it's going to be 30% higher than if we put it out in October. It's just the way of the world, just where we are. So our office won't, we used to bid projects in March, April, 15 years ago. That can't happen anymore. So we're bidding projects in September and October, right after contractors are finished doing the school job they just had. Because now they're looking for one. They're hungry. They want to do the job. So if it passes in March, to answer your question, we could put out a window project because a window project is done during the school year. So we could put the window project out. We're not beholden to the summer on that project. It's also going to take 12 to 16 weeks to get the windows fabricated. So we've already blown the summer, but that project can go out to bid. Roof projects typically can go out to bid if we can get the right numbers. So there is work that can be done. If there's work in the building that can be done during school, those are the projects we would kind of target. It's very difficult to say we're going to hit the first summer and knock out projects. You also have to recognize that a referendum, depending upon what the size of it is, could be 2 years, could be 3 years, could be 4 years. You can't do everything in 4 months, which is your summer schedule, June through September. So our strategy a lot of times is we forego the summer months. We say, the contractor can work into the school year. He can do things into the school year. The more flexibility we give the contractor, the lower the price. The more we squeeze the contractor, you got to get it done by August 15th. The price is going to be here. So we try to work and balance the budget because we know, so and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, but the budget estimates we prepare for a referendum, they bear in mind that this referendum won't be completed tomorrow. Going to be completed 2 years from now. So in the budget estimate are escalators and multipliers that take the cost and make it viable 3 years down the road. The logic and what happens most of the time is the projects we do the first year come in under budget, right? We've got budgeted numbers, but they have escalators. Since we're doing them early, they come in under budget. We take that surplus and we put it aside. As we go through the referendum, the projects start coming in on budget. And as we get to the later years of the referendum, now the projects start coming in over budget. But those projects are able to use the monies that we have in surplus from the first round. It's one pot of money and we're able to do it. So we try to plan the projects accordingly so that we know we have the ability to do them. So not everything's getting done in 1 year. It's a multi-year process, and we need to be strategic about planning it. Long question, sorry. Long answer.
Thank you. I have more, but I'll wait for my next turn.
Okay, Mrs. Stanley.
So I kind of see tonight's meeting as a little kick in the butt for the board to start getting stuff done because we know, right, dates are coming up. So the first date we have is March 25th with a submission to the DOE. What are we submitting to the DOE on the March 25th and what do we need to get done in order to have that happen?
So essentially what you need to get done, what we need to have from the board is a list of projects, approved list of projects. We do all the rest. And what the submission is a conceptual set of plans that detail the scope of work. So if it's classroom renovations, they're laid out with furniture plans and designs and laid out. They're not fully designed. In the state of New Jersey, we do not design the job to completion before the referendum. It's kind of smart, but other states don't do that. They design the entire project and then you go out. In New Jersey, we do that because if we designed every project, the board would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on design fees and the referendum could fail. Now you're stuck with a design, but no money. So we're going to submit conceptual drawings, educational specifications, and a budget estimate to DOE for them to review. DOE will review it, take their time, they will approve, they'll come back with our estimate of debt service aid, and the board will have to approve that. Say, yes, we agree to that number. If we don't, we can go back to DOE and say, why didn't you approve this? I think we should be getting approved, and we'll have that argument. But for you guys, what we really need to get done is that list of priority projects and what neighborhood we want to be in terms of referendum costs.
That's a pretty big,
Yeah.
decision in less than 30 days. My second question is, right, we started this off of, well, what happens if we get a referendum, but what happens if we don't, right? So I'm hearing you say that some of these projects, it's going to be 2 to 4 years before we even get to them if we have a referendum that passed next year, right? So I'm just trying to think of like, what are some of the issues I know that we're talking about, right? We were talking about HVAC systems, we're talking about driveways, right? Paving, drainage, some of those issues that maybe couldn't wait the 4 years compared to, some things like when you think media center. But I know, right, like there are spaces in our district that are big, but they're just not being used. They're not being utilized well. And I think that's the big push for the media center, right? Is that we could have students really using this as a space, and instead it's just a place for books and maybe AP tests. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think the bigger thing is that we realize that, stuff like heating and the driveways and the paving, right? We can't continue to wait. So I think some of the questions were, can we wait? And I think that's where we really need to think, can we wait another year to even do this?
Okay, and you're right. And that's why this process, when and if the referendum passes, or even prior to the referendum passing, we'll have an idea of what projects are the ones that we need to push forward first. What I do want to clarify is it's not March 25th. March 25th is for us to begin preparation of those packages, the DOE packages. You have until about July, end of June, July, to be able to make that decision before we have to submit to DOE.
Okay.
So it's not March.
Okay, so March 25th.
March is us beginning the preparation.
Okay.
So, and that, again, we're going to do everything we need to do to get the submissions done. But it comes down to preparing the drawings, the backgrounds for everything, looking at what your list is, looking at getting our engineers out to do that stuff and preparing the submission packages. That's not on you. June, July is going to be the area that we need to be in. The sooner we can make the decision, if we can submit in May, that just gives us more cushion. So again, I'm not pushing you to March. So just want to make sure everybody's aware.
No, I'm aware of what you're saying. Yeah.
If I can just add something to that. I think what the slide Mr. Messinio showed previously about the passage rate, one of the things that kind of is driving your timetable is that expiring debt. And if we looked at the passing rate for districts that went out for referendum with expiring debt, it's much higher, because it's much easier to tell your community you're going to get X $billion worth of projects and it's going to cost you no new money, than it is waiting till that debt expires and then go out and say, hey, you had a tax decrease and now we're going to ask you to pay that back. So that's kind of also the impetus to really pushing the timeline to make sure you catch that debt falling.
I just want to mention something. I just want to piggyback, because this may quell some of the questions. I think, as you mentioned before about those timelines and coming in the March, explain to the board where we are in this process. I know we collected all the projects of what we've talked about with the teachers, and I know where we are at this point with the demographer and all the other things. Explain where we are at this point, what we need to do, projects you collected at this point. Once we do, where that's going to go and what the board's participation is. Just pull it all together and let them get a clearer understanding of it, and I think it'll pull it in and let them absorb it and see where they got to go.
So we started out, as I said before, with the list that we originally had, the list of projects. From there, we polled the principals and administration on the projects that were done, what was new, where are we now? We are now in the process of compiling that list into that website I was telling you about, that project selection tool. That list will list each of those projects with a priority, the cost, square footage, and whatever. Once that list is done, it will now come to you as the board to say, here's the list, these are the projects and priorities. If there are other items to be added, they'll be added. If there are things that are absolute no's, they'll be removed. But that, we are already in the project planning phase by looking at projects. It now comes down to just taking that list and making decisions. Is this a priority 1 or is it a priority 4? Do we want this at all? Do we want to do all the media centers? Let's put them all in this box. Do we want to put this? And then figure out where we are. So we do have a direction. It's not like we have to do a full facilities audit again. If we had to do a full facilities audit, we wouldn't be talking, because we're not going to make that time frame. We're going to verify. We're going to have our engineers and us, we're going to go out and verify all the items we talk about, but we don't have time to do a full-blown facilities assessment on all the buildings. So we're in very good shape in terms of having, the starting point of a list. And now we're going to develop the costs and the list and give you a list that has our priorities, and you'll determine whether they are your priorities. And then ultimately we'll come up with a final decision.
Dr. Forger, you had your head up first.
Honestly, this seems like a very rushed thing. I don't like rushing anything, but let me ask you a simple question. Everything seems to be driven by the desire to essentially trick the public, to say there's debt rolling off, you're not going to see this in your tax bill. But of course, you will see it. So let me just ask you, how much debt is rolling off in March of 2026? How much do we have left? I should know this, but I think public should know too.
So the original referendum in 2006 was 24 million.
No,
Currently,
I'm just asking what's left.
Yeah.
Because that little bit that's left is what's going to impact taxes.
so there's about 1.5 million in
Okay.
debt service, but the district's receiving almost 34% on the existing debt. So what that accounts to for the average home is about $180 on the average home. So if you do nothing, essentially you get that $180 back. Or you can do projects and
So it's not like it's going to be all concealed. If we do, let's say, you mentioned 10 million, I don't think that's what it's going to be, but if we did 10 million, 34% off of that, 6.6 billion, but you're only replacing about 1.5 million. Right? So there will be a visible tax impact. I don't think the argument that, we should just do this in March of 2026 because there's debt rolling off and the public won't notice it is a good one. I think we should take our time and do this correctly and really understand what's needed here. And I don't think there's enough time to do this by March of 2026.
so, we did run some preliminary analyses for the district, and over the 20 years and with the debt service aid and the way that interest rates are today, depending on where your debt service aid comes in, you can do somewhere between 21 and 14 million and keep the payments exactly the same. So it would be exactly the same tax impact for the entire 20 years. And something that I didn't mention before, and
Yeah.
something the district has taken advantage of, is that you did refinance your old debt. So what you're paying right now is not what was voted on in 2005. You were paying more at that time.
Yeah.
And then 10 or so years later, the interest rates came down, you achieved the minimum required savings, and the district refinanced. And that's something we include in all longer term debt issues. We include a 7-year call provision. So after 7 years, again, if you reach the minimum required savings, you can refinance, and there would be some savings there. So we didn't work on the initial referendum, so I don't know what the initial tax impact was, but it was above that $180 on the average home, essentially, than it is today.
Just point out too, The typical referendum schedule for us, starting from scratch, is 12 months. So we're just getting to March, and, you know, we have a pretty good head start with the list that we have and some of the previous work that we've done. But if we were starting in a district that we were never in before, looking at a referendum, we'd be looking at a 12-month schedule.
Mrs. Terrero.
Okay, so I want to go back to piggybacking what Dr. Forger said. So when we're looking at how this would impact the taxpayer, how much, and I mean, I know we don't have the project set, how much could we borrow to make it tax neutral? And that number would also include the 34% aid that we're talking about. What's the number?
So the maximum, if all the projects were eligible, is about 21 million. And if none of the projects were eligible, it'd be 14 million. So
Okay.
you're going to be somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Yes, Mrs. Khanna.
So given that this seems like a multi-year process, clearly, we create a list of projects, we get them approved. 3 years down the line, does the board have any flexibility to choose a different project or change the scope of the projects that were approved?
So what you tell the public, what is in the referendum question, and it is nebulous, but it is detailed. But what you tell the public has to get done. You can change, you can modify the way it's done, but if you say you're going to renovate this room, you have to renovate this room. The only way you have a way around not doing a particular scope is if you run out of money by the time we get to the end of the referendum. You cannot add projects that weren't in the original intent of the project. So if we had HVAC unit ventilators in the project and the referendum called for 26 to be done, let's say we were lucky and project came in under budget and you had surplus at the end, you could do 40 if you wanted to. You could add more unit ventilators. So you can change the scope from that regard. You cannot detract from what you received funding for. So if you do less scope than what you received 34% on, DOE is going to want that 34% back on the scope that you didn't do. So we have flexibility. And what you should recognize too is when we submit these to DOE, they are conceptual designs, right? So if our design shows, you know, a desk over here and a countertop over there and something else, when we design this space and lay it out and meet with the teachers after the referendum passes, that layout is moved. We could do whatever we want as long as we meet the intent of renovating that room or upgrading that room. So the concepts are the concepts, but DOE doesn't hold us to those. They want to make sure we're meeting educational adequacy.
So a follow-up to that, who decides if the projects that are executed in the timeline actually meet the plans or whatever was submitted, approved, whatever was on the ballot? Like where's the checks and balances process to say, yes, this meets or this doesn't meet?
So part of that's on us and part of that's on DOE. When we design the projects, we have to resubmit them to the Department of Ed to be compared against the original set of drawings submitted and make sure that they meet final educational adequacy. When we receive approval the first time on the drawings, it's for preliminary eligible cost, but it's a preliminary educational adequacy. When we submit final, and it's only the educational projects that have to go again, but when we submit for final, that's how it's checked.
Got it. But then is every project, like on a project by project basis, is that how it works? Or I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the process? Like we get something approved in 2026, come 2028, come 2029. Is there like a repeated process of going back to them and getting approval? And at that point, what is the role of the board in 2028? It might be a very different board.
So it's a very good question. So the process is you submit to Department of Ed, you receive approval, everything's done. However long it takes us to do the projects, we will design them, we will put them through, we will submit for final educational review. However, there is no resubmission to DOE after that. If 2 years from now, we're finishing up the referendum, we have the list of projects, we know what has to be done, and we're working on them as we go. So there is no additional review or approval after you get your final educational adequacy approval. That's done. As far as the money, we run spreadsheets and work with the business administrator to say, okay, we had this pot of money, and we're going to work with Phoenix as well. We had this pot of money. This is what's been spent. This is what came in under budget. This is what came in over budget. This is where we are, net surplus or net, whatever. And then we'll know where we are money-wise. At the end of the project, if there's money left over, you have two options. One is to pay down the debt and give that money back to the community. Second option is to enhance the scope based upon what was originally included in the question. But there is no additional review process.
Mrs. Jolly.
So thank you very much for the presentation, and I think the board had asked some really good questions. So my one last question is, for the list of projects that you're going to provide to us, there will be a priority order, at least based on your priority. Will also include anticipated start dates, again, based on what you said about, going out for bid. There might be timing, considerations, right, of getting a better price. So I was wondering if because something could be a top priority, but you may not go out to bid for a bit. And, so I just wanted to know the start time, anticipated start time and length of each of the projects.
Typically, no, that's not something that we provide, because what happens once we have a final list of projects is projects are packaged together. So if there's window projects at 2 schools, we might package them as one project. If there are boiler projects at 5 schools, they may be packaged as one project. So that happens after we have our final list, not usually the preliminary list, because it's a economy of scale question. It is a strategic question as to which projects need to go together. Some projects may be bid alone, but we don't typically do that because of the economy of scale. We want contractors to want to bid this work and give us the best price. If we bid it off in little pieces, and it is multiple projects, it's not, this isn't one big job that we submit, one big job for all the work. We break it up into specialties. Boilers and mechanical gets bid to mechanical contractors. GC work, renovations gets bid to the GCs. Plumbing work, if it's big enough like boilers and whatnot, they'll go just to the plumbers. So this is going to be a strategic process, but it's typically after we have that final list.
And are you managing those projects throughout the entire period?
Yes, our contract, our post-referendum contract would have construction administration services included in there. There is, there's always the ability to bring on a construction management firm or a clerk of the works type person that would work on behalf of the district, depending upon the size of the referendum. We did a $150 million referendum in Bridgewater. That was an absolute necessity. They brought on someone to work as an employee. They didn't hire an outside construction firm. They hired a referendum manager, and we've worked with him. He's our daily on-site eyes and ears. So there are many ways to control the management, but our contract will have management of these projects. And $150 million in Bridgewater includes 30,000 square foot of additions. So if we're doing a boiler project this summer, we may have 10 projects in one summer. We pretty much can manage that. So it's an added expense, but if it's something the district wants to entertain, that needs to go into the budget as well.
Mrs. Khanna.
Can you explain a little bit about all the work and the people that are associated with these projects? Are they all expected to be paid using the debt that we would take on? Or is there a budgetary impact? So every year we have to plan for a budget, right? The district will have to itemize a bunch of things. So in your example, the project manager that somebody hired, would that all come from the referendum?
Yes,
Kitty, so to
as long as you tell Mr. Messinio at the beginning, submitted to the DOE.
Okay, so that's something that has to be planned up front, and depending on how many projects or how many projects all at the same time, you might recommend, think of hiring a project manager. And is that person then essentially a district employee, like a contractor?
There are a variety of ways you can do it. There are gentlemen out there that are they're considered clerks of the works. They work for the district. They would be an outside consultant to the district. There are construction management firms, full firms that would provide a on-site manager, however many days a week that you would require. And they would also have support with them, secretarials, everything. Again, there's a cost for that. And then if you did we've had districts, smaller districts, that have a director of facilities who's very savvy and knowledgeable. They paid him a stipend to be their eyes and ears on the ground while we're managing the construction. So yes, I mean, there is a variety of ways to do this. It's just, what is the appetite, of the board, and how big is this referendum ultimately going to be? And is it worth the 3% or 4% it would cost to hire a CM?
Mr. Messino, the Board of Ed is not the only decision on the projects. It's the community
Absolutely.
also decision based on the survey that we will send out.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the public here in person.
Do you want to?
Oh, wait.
Steve Roguski.
Excuse me, Steve, could you just wait a second? We had a question. Yes. Go ahead. You want to ask in there?
So before people ask questions, I wonder is there like a sample question that can be put up on the screen if there is one, for people to just understand at the end of the entire process, when we say that there will be questions on the ballot, what does a question look like? Is there any chance? Is there a sample?
So tonight I don't have one, but
Okay.
as part of our presentations throughout the referendum, we will provide what that sample ballot looks like. We also provide links to voter registration and things like that. There's a whole voter turnout piece that we do as part of the public relations piece for the project. But showing that sample of the ballot will be part of the presentations that we do. So
Okay.
people are aware of it before they walk in the ballot.
Thank you.
And what you guys can do is New Jersey School Board Association just came out with a list of all the March ones on their website today. And they have questions on there that are all being presented in March.
That's
So
a
if you-
great idea.
Yeah, so if you want.
Before public comments, let me read what I have to read. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. The board requests that individuals state their name, town of residence, or school of attendance for the record, the specific action items they are commenting on, and ask that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable, for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerns a district staff member, is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. So we will deal with the speakers who are in person first and then online. You are limited to 3 minutes in duration. Okay, Steve.
My name is Steve Grugeski, and I'm a resident on Lenape Lane in Berkeley Heights. I have a question that just relates to the actual referendum date, and that is, if you had the referendum the same time as the general election, could you skip the 30K?
This is going to be, maybe we should do this a little differently. Maybe we should have our presenters respond to each question first, and then we'll go on. I think that would be better. Okay, so yes, this is different than we're used to.
So The gentleman is accurate. You would not incur the $30,000 if you were to ask a question in November. However, the timing for the November election this year, you wouldn't have no chance of being able to submit the project applications and get on the November ballot. That's not a practical date this year, but there would be no cost.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Mendenhall, and I teach environmental science at GL.
My name's Anna Kramarchuk. I'm president of Environmental Club at GL, and I live in Berkeley Heights.
Thank you.
So we didn't realize this was the question format, but we came to encourage you to add solar and energy efficiency projects to your list of projects. And I have a couple of examples of how this can save us money. So the schools have saved about $10,000 a year with the existing solar projects. At Woodruff, they generate about 90% of the power that they use, 90%. And there's lots more room. At GL, it's about 15%, but we use a lot more power. The power purchase agreement that you have right now, expires in 2027. So make a decision about that. Anyway, so I had actually 3 asks. One is that while you're deciding which projects, you consult with the students, because the students have a lot of knowledge. They're very smart, and this is their future. So they have a lot of good ideas. Like, for example, the IMC is used all the time, and it's a really, really dreary place. Half the lights don't work. So that I think I would bump to the top of your list. But also, solar can save you money. So Montclair is saving about $100,000 a year, and the panels that they just installed are expected to last for 40 years. So it's kind of a win-win. Energy efficiency, the gym lights were all replaced in, I think it was 2016, and it was expected to save over 10 years, $215,000. So these projects that we're asking for are going to pay for themselves. They're not easy. I'm not saying that they're easy, but I think they're important. Okay, and Anna.
So one overall goal of the Environmental Club for the past few years was in promoting efficiency of lighting in all of our buildings in the district. And some benefits of replacing our fluorescent light systems with LED lights include overall less wattage, which means longer lifespans, and replacing light bulbs can be costly and dangerous for staff, considering that the CFL bulbs also contain mercury. And making this switch now will allow us to put money that would otherwise be put into lighting costs to be directed elsewhere, such as essential building maintenance, enhancing educational programs, supporting staff, and improving student experiences. And another action we should consider in achieving energy efficiency is upgrading school HVAC systems, which would similarly save a lot of money in maintenance hours and energy use. Our current system relies on fossil fuels for heating and therefore lowers air quality in and surrounding our facilities, but installing an electric heat pump or a new high efficiency HVAC system will make the schools be greener, cheaper, and healthier for all students now and in the future. And I think that our school making improvements to mitigate climate change will pave the way for students to take action and contribute to a wider global effort to preserve our environment for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. You may.
That I saw that you had experience with solar on your website. Yeah, so can you tell us about projects that you've done?
That was going to be my question, Mr. Macedo. Can you answer that about solar projects?
So yes,
Mhm.
we do solar. We have done solar. So the biggest issue with solar is that you can't put solar on roofs that aren't good. So roof replacement is paramount. The good part of that is if we do include roofing in the referendum, that roofing gets done first. Solar would not be tied to a referendum because there are other vehicles in which to finance solar. Solar is typically done through a PPA or a power purchase agreement, which is a 15-year lease purchase with a provider to basically provide the district with a fixed energy rate. So many people, when you were with ASIS, you were paying 11 cents per kilowatt hour. With solar, you could drop that number to 0 or 3, depending upon the size of the system. You mentioned that one of the schools has 90% of the power being used. The only issue with solar is that there are limitations with how much solar you can produce. You cannot overproduce. So if you're already producing 90% at that school, you can't add any more to it. And other schools, they're going to be limited by shading, equipment. So that if the roof is clean and free, we can certainly do solar analyses and determine whether you have the ability to do systems on each of the roofs. It's definitely something that is viable. It would be viable after the referendum, not part of it. If you were to purchase the solar, there are other issues with that, and there is a cost to the district up front. With a PPA, there is zero cost to the district up front because the providers are able to sell the SRECs and gain benefits from the tax credits available through a solar project. That's why they're able to put in, they're basically leasing your roof. They're putting the equipment on your roof. They own it. They maintain it for the life of the lease. Typically, at the end of the lease, they will give you an offer for $1 or $5 to buy the system. At the end of 15 years, a solar system doesn't stop producing. It continues to produce. While it degrades minimally. The only time we've ever told a solar company to remove the solar panels at the end of 15 years is when the district roof was out of warranty during the duration and they were experiencing major leaks. The reason that we said no, take it and get rid of it is because the cost to remove solar panels from a building in order to repair a roof is very expensive. It is the lessee's obligation, so it's yours. If you had a leak under a solar panel, you'd have to remove it. You are obliged to pay for the removal and the reinstallation, and you're also obliged to pay the provider for the downtime associated with the lack of energy being produced while the solar panels were off. So there's an issue with that whole thing. But yes, solar is something we can look into. I will point out that every project that we design for the district uses leadership and energy principles. So we use LEED design as part of everything that we do. Certification of LEED is different. It's more expensive to do. But everything that we do, we try to do environmentally friendly, local sources, no overseas shipping, any of the products we use, American made, so that, and local, not just American made. We don't want to ship from California to New Jersey. So if there's local sources, we'll do that. So we try to use those principles in our design.
To clarify, the referendum would cover roofs,
Yes.
but not solar.
Yeah,
And that would come after.
correct. Correct.
And when you say they won't cover, is it because they don't get the debt service aid? Just help me
I
understand.
say won't cover.
Solar panels not
Well,
being
not
covered in the referendum
The reason we wouldn't is because there are other vehicles for financing the solar.
because they are better than doing it through a referendum.
If you would be paying money up front for the solar panels.
With
In
the
this case, you would be getting a power purchase agreement.
Okay.
And
okay,
they would put them on, they would lease your roofs, you'd get a fixed energy cost over the life of the project. They would provide, screens in your science labs that show the energy being produced and the power being produced. It could be used for instructional models. So there's a lot that can be done through that system. If you were to purchase it yourself, you're now responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep. And if a string goes out, now it's more, we tend not to do ownership models, but they are available.
and the referendum would lead to an ownership model, whereas the other ones are more of
Correct.
the lease models that you talked about.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the public? Mr. Tequila.
Good evening, everybody. Michael DeQuella, Whitney Drive. For disclosure purposes, former member of the Town Council and former member of the Board of Education. First, I want to say I feel old now because I was part of the public committee that put in that solar panel back in Woodruff in here, so that does make me feel a little old. Don't have a question, more of a comment and a plea to the board. This is a very important issue facing this district. When I sat on this side of the table, this is something we did review and debate, and a lot of work went into it. I encourage the board to please look at the work that went into the prioritization of the list, the generation of lists. Obviously, Frank, working with you back then, we put a lot of work into it. Priorities have changed, but the age of these buildings have not. A lot of buildings are aging. We've done some work. I know you've done some work over the last 3 years, but the bulk of it has not been done. It is a tight timetable, but not to disagree with a former colleague, we need to do this. We need to get this done. We need to get this out to the public. This school district needs a lot of work. That it's not going to be the fancy hey, look at this beautiful night, great things. There's a lot of things behind the doors, the boiler rooms, the roofs, windows, everything. It needs to be done in order to help out. And as you brought up a good comment about environmental and everything, you're conditioning outside air. You're spending a lot of money, wasting heating, cold air coming in, cooling, hot air coming in during the summer and the winter, respectively. So I do encourage you, take a look at the list, get this going, start educating the public on the needs. We have a very big need to it. Do this for the children, for the environment, do this for the teachers, the administration are in the building. It's very important. So again, I just ask everyone to please work together. Let's get this going. Let's work to get this referendum on the path to get executed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from public in person? Okay. Haley, do we have anyone online to promote? Haley, I can't see who's first. Could you let me know?
It's me.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
thank you. Yes.
Hi, John McWes. Thank you for the presentation. A few points. I'm not against the referendum. In fact, I think actually it's a good idea. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. I think as a general idea, my concerns, I think, have to do with you're asking the public for money, and I think there has to be clarity, and I don't think this is on the consultants. I think this is on the board. There has to be clarity on how the budget is going to make more sense. In about 10 years, we're probably, I think, projected, I looked at this last night, I think we're projecting to lose about 200 students every 5 years. If trends continue, that's off of the top of my head. And I think there's got to be a lot of thinking around what that means in terms of building projects. But before we even get in, and so we kind of have to right size the budget. And I'm not talking about tax cuts. I'm talking about how some services are increasing despite enrollments reducing. Like big discussion 2 meetings ago about police and schools. That cost doubled, within a period of a couple of years. We hired an athletics trainer that I'm still not sure what that's about. There's a lot of bloat in there that a person would take a month to look at and figure that out. And I think the board, if the board wants to engender trust, it can't be a marketing plan from the consultants. It needs to start with an honest and authentic effort at the budget so that the public can feel, okay, so these guys are dealing with us in a genuine way now. There aren't these weird transfers. There aren't these weird positions. There aren't costs going north while enrollments are going south. And I think if you right size that, and you come to the public with a good effort on the budget this year, I think that the referendum as a whole might be easier to swallow. I like the idea of it being in a general election. I don't think the goal should be to get the referendum through. I think the goal should be to give the public access to make a decision with the best information they have. So I don't think this is about selling it. I think the public will buy it if it's a good product. I think if it's about building a good product based on a good foundation, and you won't have to worry about what month to put this on. The public will vote for it if it's good. I want to disagree with one thing the consultant said about timing of information. I think information should be put out there when it's available. Like I was a little bothered by the fact that this presentation wasn't out there before the presentation tonight. Yeah, and I think you might get some scrutiny and some comments and things like that. But I think that can help you understand what might be coming in the meeting and what questions the community might have. It's not there to hurt you. You want to know ahead of time what people are going to say or what they're going to think when they're looking at that piece of paper. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Messina, can you talk about the difference between an annual yearly budget by a district and a referendum? Or, yes, someone.
So your annual budget, to answer the gentleman's question inquiry, that's obviously, it's your general fund operating budget. That's for your utilities, for your staff, for healthcare benefits, all your costs of operating the school district. For a referendum is one of the limited ways where a school district has the legal ability to borrow money just for capital projects. And that's why you're allowed to finance it over the useful life of those projects. So we're talking about two different things: the general fund operating budget. That's what you guys are going to be preparing in the next month to cover your operating costs. And there is a small portion of that budget that goes for capital maintenance, and you may be able to put money in your capital reserve. But for the bond referendum, we're just talking about borrowing money to finance capital projects and capital needs and financing it over the useful life. And when you think about it, and this is kind of hard, whenever I try to do a project at my own house, I try to save the money to pay for the project up front. But I don't get debt service aid at home. So for you guys, saving the money in your general fund operating budget and putting your capital reserve, if it's an eligible project, you're actually penalizing yourself because you're not getting that debt service aid component. And also, when I save the money to do that bathroom renovation at my house, I'm the only one that's got to pay the debt. Here, if you spread the cost out over the 20 years, everybody that's going to live in your community over those 20 years pays their fair share of the roof or the media center that everybody's going to use over those 20 years. If you pay for it all today, you guys that are sitting in this room and the people that are here are going to pay the 100% of the cost for a community asset that people are going to use for 20 years. So that's the difference between the current general fund operating budget and the debt service budget that is authorized via referendum.
Thank you. Haley, is there another person who would like to ask a question? Yes.
Yeah, it's me again. Sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a second time. I wasn't conflating the annual budget with the referendum. The point that I was trying to make was that the referendum requires public trust. And we've had an issue with that when it comes to the budgets for the past several years. And yes, Dr. Felter, you are not responsible for anything that's happened in that time. But I think everybody sitting at that table has a responsibility to fix it moving forward. And I think if you're going to ask the public to agree to this kind of investment, the first question they're going to want to know, or the answer they're going to want to know, is what are you doing with our money that you already have this year? That's all. I understand they're two different things, but trust in one leads to buy-in in another, in my opinion. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there no other comments from offline or online participants? No. Okay. Mrs. Jolly, follow-up question?
Sorry, there was just one comment that was made with respect to the difference in dates, the March date versus the November date. And I think you said something like, oh, the November date's not really viable because of a timing of filing of documents. Can you just replay that a little bit? Just explain that one more time, please.
So again, given the timeline, if we were to take any referendum date that we have and work backwards, the 61 days for the County Board of Elections, which is 2 months, the DOE review process, which is a month for you to review and come up and approve the PEC letters, and then DOE's process. DOE's process can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months. So we're already moved back 9 months in the process. So if we move further back from where we are today or move forward from where we are today, making November, making the submissions and being able to get the information down to DOE and get approvals, it's very, very difficult.
So are you referring to November of 2025?
November this year.
Oh, I was thinking, I wasn't thinking
The
November.
following year
2023.
gives you more time.
Okay, that's fine.
But the following year gives you more time, but you lose the roll-off of the debt. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is an important issue, so I'll allow other speakers in public. Did you have another question?
Hello, I just wanted to agree completely with what Mr. DeKilla said about how we should probably spend a lot more money on like improving what we have already, because especially in the last couple of years here, I've noticed a lot of like maintenance issues that have caused like disruptions in learning. Like for example, teachers' rooms, like the heating breaks, so we have to like move our classroom entirely and we have to abandon what we're doing, or pipe bursts. So I think if we replace those systems and we make them more efficient, we could just be saving a lot more time and money while also saving all the trouble that we would otherwise have from having to move classrooms or even cancel school.
Thank you. I see no other comments from the public or online. Is there any follow-ups from the board? Mrs. Terrero.
So I just want to have some clarity on a couple of things as we're talking about dates, November, March. If hypothetically we proceeded with the March date, how much additional time items need to happen after that in order to be able to leverage the debt roll-off, as opposed to pushing it out to a later date? Maybe it wouldn't be November, maybe you do July or whatever that is. What else needs to happen so that we would be able to utilize the debt roll-off?
So once the vote is successful, if it were to be held in March, it takes about a month and a half to 2 months to issue the bonds. And then you essentially receive all that money in a month and a half, 2 months. And then the architect takes it from there. Your debt service payments would be in the following fiscal year. So you have the money almost immediately.
So the debt is rolling off in March of 26, correct?
Yes.
So in order for us to be able to leverage it, you said it has to fall within that calendar year? Is that accurate? Or it has to fall within a month of when March happens? What specifically is it?
So you have to issue the bonds in that same fiscal year, and you also, because you have to get it into your next fiscal year's budget. So in order to do that, when you do have a March referendum, you have to do it right away because the budget needs to be finalized in May or so. So we immediately start the process of going to the market and getting things sold so that you have those numbers, because you need the final debt service numbers in the budget.
I'm asking these questions because what if we run out of time and don't hit March? What happens?
If you don't hit March, you're going to miss your debt falling off. March is the last possible date, because as you're doing your budget for this year now, you're going to need to sell those bonds right away so you can put those debt service aid numbers in your budget, just like you're preparing it this year. So if you miss March, you're going to miss that debt falling off.
Okay.
The bond sale has to happen. Like reality, a lot of districts that would have debt falling off here, maybe we would have had a September referendum or even a referendum this year to hit that debt fall. This is kind of like the last possible
Okay, so
opportunity.
that's like the 12th hour.
You're like
Got it.
12th hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Got
it.
yeah, just to be honest.
Can I ask related question? When was this referendum in 2006? Is that what you said before?
It was a December 2005 referendum, and then the bonds were issued in 2006.
So they did it in December 2005. There was enough time to kind of plan it for the budget for next year.
Right. As long as you issue sometime in this fiscal year between July and April, you can include it in your next fiscal year's budget. So,
Okay.
for example, if your debt was falling off not in 26 but in 27, you could issue bonds in July of 26, which would put your next payment in July of 27. So it would kind of follow that. You have the whole fiscal year to issue the bonds, but because of the timeline of the actual vote, you only have that short period of time to get it done.
And it sounds more like it's that plus the fact that it has to be budgeted. The next budget is sort of driving the timing for this.
Right. You can't put an estimated amount in your budget for debt service. And
That's
so-
kind of what I
right. yeah.
understood. Okay.
Sorry, and
Mrs. Jolly.
thank you. And so when we're talking about, coordinating with the old debt rolling off and the new debt coming on, is it really just, not an optics thing, but, well, I mean, in a sense, an optics thing, right? So if we go in November, the debt's going to roll off, people's taxes will, reduce, right? But then when the new debt will come on, the taxes will go up. So um, it's not that people would be losing money. It's just the appearance of having a lower tax rate, and then with the new bonds coming on, having then the tax rate go back up to maybe where it was before,
Right.
the old debt rolled off.
Yeah, it's part of the planning phase. I mean, we do this with districts across the entire state, it just makes fiscal sense to sort of just keep things where they're at, and it's more palatable to the public to do projects and not pay the additional money. And yeah, if you're saving money in one year and then it jumps back up again, it just, it looks maybe like the planning wasn't done timely or something of that nature.
Well,
Right, but
also, like,
Mrs. Stanley?
if we're, what I'm hearing, right, if we waited to November of 2026, it wouldn't be in the budget until the August 1st of 2027, 2028 budget, right? And again, this is just setting us back and back and back and back when we know, right? Like, I mean, most of us have been impacted in some way by maintenance and building issues lately, right? We have the middle school all watching for snow days on whether they're going to have to go back on a Saturday, right? So I think, right, that we can keep saying, like, we can do this anytime, right? But it's going to get harder and harder and harder to do. And it's going to push the timeline back and back and back, right? Because now you're not going to be able to get the things done even. It's going to be 3 to 5 years instead of
Right,
2 to
but-
4.
Mrs. Jolly?
Yeah, I wasn't arguing one way or the other. I just wanted to clarify, right? So I'm not necessarily opposed. I just wanted to understand what what the impacts were.
And if I can just add
Yes,
something, the
please.
longer you wait to do projects, the more expensive they become. So the longer you put it off, the escalation for the costs are going to increase over time. So that's something to keep in mind.
Can you clarify one quick thing? There is so the referendum and everything that we would approve that goes to the DOE, is the cost of the project some sort of a not to exceed number, or is it just a number?
The number is not a not to exceed because it is budgeted per the work that you're doing. It has, DOE doesn't, will allow, DOE requires that every project that goes down have contingency attached to it. They require a minimum of 5% contingency. You have to recognize that that started in 2000. We don't put a project down without less than 10% contingency. And in some cases, if it's heavy mechanical, may have 12% contingency. So the estimate is actually calculated based on square foot cost. It's not a detailed line item estimate. It is a square foot budget, and we categorize and catalog all of the jobs that we've done in the past, the projects that we've recently bid, and we have a database that shows a toilet room is going to cost us $120,000 to renovate a medium-sized gang toilet. It's going to cost us $60,000 to do a unisex toilet. So every project that's in here, we are going to estimate. That estimate is going to include contractors' overhead and profit, architects, engineers, bonding, legal fees. It's going to include contingency. It's going to include environmental testing if it's necessary. It's going to include all of the costs associated with the project. So when we put it down, it's not just a construction cost, it is a total project cost. DOE approves it based on that. Now, if we've shorted it, we don't get any more debt service aid. We get only what we put down, only based on what we put down. So our estimates are conservative. If in fact they are ultra concerned, and we have to be mindful because we have a referendum to pass. So we can't just pad the cost and the referendum has $40 million in, contingency. We can't do that. So we have to be mindful of how we put together the budget estimate. It has to be accurate, but it has to plan for the future. And once that's done, that's it. There is no going back to DOE and asking for more money, asking for more debt service aid. We have a very, very good track record of estimating projects. And as I said before, some in the beginning come in over budget or under budget. And as we get to the end, it all comes out in the wash. So that's the short answer.
Dr. Forager?
Yeah, can you just, you mentioned a way that you could get debt service aid but you were really taking the money out of the capital reserve.
Yeah.
Can you just go over that again? I
Sure.
wasn't familiar with that.
I'll give it a shot, Tony, but yeah. So we've had districts that have a significant amount of surplus in debt service aid, right? Or, no, I'm sorry, significant amount of surplus in capital reserve. They've got a lot of money and they want to use it to get projects done. Why don't we do the paving or why don't we do the roofs? They really need to get done. We should do it. And as Mr. Salamini mentioned, if you do it, you have the money, you're going to pay full price, 100%. There is no aid unless it's a ROD grant, which they're only offered sporadically, but there is no aid. So if we take that project and roll it into the referendum, the cost of that roof is now receiving 34% in debt service aid. Once, as Tony structures the question, it can be said that the district is going to go out for a $20 million referendum. They are going to receive $7 or $8 million in debt service aid, and they are going to add $2 million from capital reserve to offset that further. The tax impact is based upon what's left. So you have the ability to use capital reserve to offset the debt prior to the impact.
But the project has to be in the referendum, right?
Mhm.
But you're just not going to borrow money on it. You're not going to borrow the money. You're going to get the funds from the capital reserve.
So there's two ways to do it.
Okay.
There's the one that Mr. Messinio just described,
Yeah.
where you're putting in a contribution of your capital reserve. And that potentially you could lose that service aid that way. Alternatively, what you could do is the regulations allow you to use capital reserve to finance any project in your long-range facility plan, but the regulations also allow you to use capital reserve to make a debt service payment. So by a simple example, you have $1 million roof project, you go to referendum, you get 34% of the cost. So now your roof project costs you $660,000. So you have a $660,000 debt service payment. You could technically pay that full debt service payment from your capital reserve that year after you got the aid. So you'd write a check for $660,000 from your capital reserve, but you've already gotten the 34% aid. So you could have paid prior $1 million out of your capital reserve, but if you do the referendum, you get 34%, and then instead of budgeting the debt service to the taxpayers, you allocate capital reserve. Mr. Messinio's suggestion works out well when you're trying to lower your tax impact as well. You can put a contribution if you have capital reserve in there. So then you're going to borrow less money for a project, which then reduces the tax impact. So there's different ways to kind of.
Is there any ability to use maintenance reserve in the same way?
No, just capital
Okay.
reserve.
Just a follow-up to that, when you craft the question that goes on the ballot, is this information available to the people to say, this is the total, value of the referendum, the cost of projects? And is there a commitment that goes with the question that says, there will be, $2 million worth of capital reserves that will go towards servicing that bond? Is that how it's done?
Potentially. If you use the example Mr. Messinio said, that'll be in the question. If you use the other alternative I suggested, that's up to the board that's seated at that time to make that decision when they annually structure their budget.
So it's a board decision on what type of question
Correct.
ends up on the ballot.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I see no more questions by the board or by our public in person or online. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Khanna. Second? Thank you, Mrs. Torero. A voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? The meeting is adjourned at 8:58 p.m. Thank you all so much.